I never thought I'd feel like a stranger at my own son's wedding. But there I was, standing in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Manor Hotel, wearing my simple floral dress, while everyone around me sparkled in designer gowns and expensive suits. The chandeliers above threw golden light across the marble floors, and I felt so small, so out of place, like a wildflower that had somehow gotten mixed into a bouquet of prize-winning roses. My name is Dorothy Harrison, but everyone calls me Harry. I'm 87 years old now, and I've lived through more than most people can imagine. I raised 3 children on my own after my husband passed when I was just 42. I worked 2 jobs most of my life, cleaning houses during the day and waitressing at night. My hands are wrinkled and spotted now, the knuckles swollen from arthritis, but they're honest hands. Working hands. Hands that built a life for my children when we had nothing. My youngest son, David, was getting married. David, my baby, who I used to rock to sleep singing old lullabies. David, who cried on his first day of school and held my hand so tight I thought he'd never let go. David, who became a successful investment banker in the city, living in a world I barely understood anymore. The invitation had arrived 3 months earlier. It was elegant, embossed with gold lettering on thick cream paper that felt expensive just to touch. Mr. David Harrison and Miss Charlotte Pemberton request the honor of your presence. I had traced my fingers over David's name and felt tears prick my eyes. My boy was getting married. But when I called him to say I'd be there, something in his voice made my heart sink. Mom, listen. He paused, and I could hear the hesitation. Charlotte's family is, well, they're very traditional, very formal. Maybe you could, I don't know, borrow something nice to wear? From Aunt Susan, maybe? I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked down at my worn slippers and the small living room of my modest apartment. The furniture was old but clean, the carpet faded but vacuumed, the curtains handmade from fabric I'd bought on sale 15 years ago. David, I have a nice dress, the blue one with the flowers. I wore it to your brother's graduation, remember? Another pause. Longer this time. That was 12 years ago, Mom. I want you to feel comfortable. Charlotte's family is flying in from New York. Her father owns half the hotels on the East Coast. There'll be photographers, society people. I see, I said quietly. You don't want me to embarrass you. No, Mom, no. That's not what He sighed, frustrated. You know what? Forget it. Just come. Please come. I want you there. But I heard what he didn't say. I heard the worry in his voice, the shame he tried to hide. And it broke something inside me that I didn't know could still break. I almost didn't go. I sat on my bed the night before the wedding, staring at that floral dress hanging on my closet door. And I thought about calling David to make up an excuse. My back was hurting. The weather was supposed to be bad. I was too old for such a long drive. But then I looked at the photograph on my nightstand. David at 5 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, grinning up at me with frosting on his nose from his birthday cake. A cake I'd made from scratch because we couldn't afford to buy one. He told me it was the best cake in the whole world. I couldn't miss his wedding. No matter how much it might hurt, no matter how out of place I might feel, I had to be there. Because I'm his mother, and mothers show up, even when their hearts are breaking. So I put on that floral dress. I brushed my thin gray hair and pinned it back the way I always did. I wore my only pair of good shoes, black pumps with small heels that I'd bought at a discount store 3 years ago. I looked in the mirror and saw an old woman in an old dress, and I wondered how I'd become invisible to my own son. The drive to the hotel took 2 hours. My old sedan coughed and wheezed the whole way, and I prayed it wouldn't break down. I couldn't afford a tow truck, much less repairs. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Manor, I sat for a long moment staring at the building. It was magnificent. Stone columns, ivy-covered walls, a fountain in the entrance courtyard where water danced in the afternoon sun. Luxury cars filled the parking lot, Mercedes, BMWs, even a few I didn't recognize because they were so far beyond my world. My little sedan looked like it had wandered in by mistake. I checked my reflection one more time in the rearview mirror, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. The lobby was even more intimidating than I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers, marble everywhere, fresh flowers in arrangements taller than I was. A man in a tuxedo was directing guests toward the ballroom. "Name, please?" he asked, barely glancing at me. "Dorothy Harrison. I'm the groom's mother." His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he caught himself. "Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Right this way." I followed him through hallways lined with oil paintings and gilded frames, my modest heels clicking softly against the polished floors. And that's when I heard it, the first whisper. "Is that really his mother?" A woman's voice, sharp with disbelief. "Poor David," someone else murmured. "Can you imagine?" I kept walking, my cheeks burning, my hands gripping my small purse so tightly my knuckles turned white. The man in the tuxedo pretended not to hear, but I saw his shoulders stiffen. When we reached the ballroom, he gestured toward a table near the back. "You're seated at table 12, Mrs. Harrison." Table 12. I looked across the room and saw David and his bride-to-be at the head table, surrounded by what were clearly Charlotte's family and the wedding party. Table 12 was so far away, I might as well have been in another room. "Thank you," I said quietly, and made my way toward my assigned seat. As I walked through that ballroom, I felt eyes on me from every direction. Women in silk and diamonds, men in tailored suits that probably cost more than I made in a month. They glanced at me, then looked away quickly, some hiding smiles behind champagne glasses, others whispering to their companions. I found table 12 tucked in the corner, partially hidden behind a large floral arrangement. Sitting there were a few other guests who looked as out of place as I felt, an elderly couple I didn't recognize, a young man in an ill-fitting suit who kept tugging at his collar, and a middle-aged woman who gave me a sympathetic smile as I sat down. "Hello," she said warmly. "I'm Patricia. I work with David at the bank." "Well, I'm his secretary, actually." "I'm Maggie," I replied, grateful for her kindness. "David's mother." Her eyes widened. "Oh, I should have known. David has your eyes." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I think it's wonderful that you're here. David talks about you sometimes. He says you're the strongest person he's ever known." Those words should have comforted me, but they only made the ache in my chest worse. If David thought I was so strong, why was I seated in the back corner? Why had he sounded so worried about me embarrassing him? Before I could respond, I heard a familiar laugh from across the room. My daughter, Rebecca, had arrived. Rebecca, my firstborn, who became a lawyer and married a surgeon. She wore a silver gown that hugged her slim figure, her hair professionally styled, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. She was beautiful. She was also scanning the room with the same critical eye I'd seen her use in court. When she spotted me, her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. She made her way over, her heels clicking authoritatively against the marble. "Mom," she said, kissing the air near my cheek without actually touching me. "You came." "Of course I came. David's my son." She glanced down at my dress and I saw it, that flash of disappointment quickly masked. That's the dress from Thomas's graduation, isn't it?" Thomas was her older brother, my firstborn. He hadn't come to the wedding. He was too busy with his medical practice in California, he'd said. But I knew the truth. Thomas had stopped calling years ago, stopped visiting. He'd built a new life where his humble beginnings didn't exist. "It's a perfectly good dress," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Rebecca sighed. "Mom, I sent you money last month. I told you it was for something nice, something for the wedding." "I used it to fix my water heater," I said quietly. "It broke. I couldn't take cold showers all winter, Rebecca." "You should have told me. I would have sent more. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a—" She stopped, glanced around at the watching faces, and lowered her voice. "We'll talk about this later. I need to go say hello to Charlotte's parents." She squeezed my shoulder awkwardly and walked away, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. Patricia, the kind secretary, patted my hand. "Family can be complicated," she said softly. "Yes," I agreed, watching my daughter disappear into the crowd of glittering strangers. "Yes, they can." The ceremony was beautiful. David stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking more handsome than I'd ever seen him. When Charlotte walked down the aisle in her stunning white gown, her train held by two adorable flower girls, I felt tears stream down my face. My baby was getting married. But those tears weren't entirely happy ones, because when David's eyes swept the room as Charlotte approached, looking for his family, looking for me, his gaze skipped right over table 12. He didn't see me there in my corner, or maybe he chose not to see me. Charlotte was lovely, I'll give her that. Tall and elegant, with perfect blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never knowing want. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the marriage, I felt a crazy urge to stand up and shout, "I object to being invisible. I object to being hidden away like a shameful secret." But I didn't. I sat quietly in my corner and watched my son marry a woman I'd only met twice before, both times in brief, awkward encounters where Charlotte had been polite but distant, the way you might be polite to someone serving you at a restaurant. After the ceremony, as everyone moved toward the reception area, I made my way slowly through the crowd. My back was aching from the hard chair, and I needed to find a bathroom. That's when I overheard them. Charlotte's mother, a woman with silver hair and a diamond necklace that probably cost more than my car, was speaking to a group of women near the bar. I'd stopped to rest against a pillar, catching my breath, when I heard her voice carry across the space. "Of course, David comes from very humble beginnings. His mother, poor dear, she's quite simple. We've arranged the seating very carefully to avoid any awkwardness." The women around her made sympathetic noises. "Does she know?" one of them asked. "About the prenup?" "I'm sure David's handled it," Charlotte insisted. "With his background, we needed to protect the family assets. You understand." They moved away, their laughter tinkling like breaking glass, and I stood there feeling like I'd been slapped. Simple, humble beginnings, background to be protected against. I thought about all those years. The nights I'd worked until my feet bled in shoes that didn't fit properly because I couldn't afford better. The times I'd eaten nothing but toast for dinner so my children could have meat and vegetables. The way I'd sewn David's shirts by hand when we couldn't afford new ones, staying up late by lamplight until my eyes burned. David had worn those shirts proudly to school. He'd never complained, never acted ashamed. When had that changed? When had I become something to hide? The reception hall was a dream of white roses and crystal. Round tables draped in silk surrounded a parquet dance floor, and servers in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like art than food. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and everything glowed with the warm light of 100 candles. I made my way back to table 12, where Patricia and the other guests were already seated. A server came by with champagne, and I took a glass even though I rarely drink. My hands were shaking, and I needed something to hold on to. "Are you all right, Mrs. Harrison?" Patricia asked, concern in her eyes. "I'm fine, dear," I lied, just a bit overwhelmed by all this beauty. The servers began bringing out the first course, some sort of soup with a fancy French name I couldn't pronounce. It was delicious, I'm sure, but it tasted like nothing in my mouth. I kept glancing toward the head table where David sat beside Charlotte, both of them laughing at something her father was saying. That's when I noticed my other daughter had arrived, not Rebecca, my middle child, Jennifer. Jennifer, who I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Jennifer, who'd called me 3 months ago, asking if I could loan her $5,000 to invest in a business opportunity. When I gently explained that I didn't have that kind of money, she'd gotten angry. "You always favored David," she'd snapped. "I bet if he asked, you'd find a way." I'd tried to explain that I'd given all my children everything I could, that I'd worked myself to exhaustion to give them opportunities I never had. But she'd hung up on me, and I hadn't heard from her since. Now here she was, dressed in a red cocktail dress that was a bit too tight, a bit too low-cut for a wedding. She was laughing loudly at table 4, already on what looked like her 3rd glass of wine, surrounded by young people I didn't recognize. When our eyes met across the room, she raised her glass to me in a mocking salute. I turned away, my heart heavy. The meal continued. Course after course of food I could barely taste. Around me, conversations swirled about stock markets and vacation homes in the Hamptons, about children at prestigious universities and upcoming trips to Europe. I had nothing to contribute. My world was so small compared to this. Library books and crossword puzzles, phone calls with old friends, the small victories of making my pension stretch to the end of each month. After dinner, Charlotte's father stood to give a toast. He was a large man with a booming voice and the kind of confidence that comes from old money and older privilege. "My daughter," he began, his voice carrying across the silent room, "has always had exquisite taste. Even as a little girl, she knew quality when she saw it. She wanted the best toys, the best clothes, the best education." He paused for laughter, which came obediently. "And now she's chosen the best husband." He went on, talking about David's success, his promising future, his remarkable rise in the business world. Every word was like a knife, cutting away at the years I'd spent raising that boy, the sacrifices that made his remarkable rise possible. "David comes from modest means," Charlotte's father continued, and the room grew quiet. "But he's proven that with hard work and, let's be honest, the right connections." More laughter. "Anyone can succeed in this country. We're proud to welcome him into our family." I watched David's face as his new father-in-law spoke. I saw the way he smiled and nodded, accepting the praise, accepting the subtle condescension. I saw him glance briefly toward the back of the room, toward table 12, and then look away quickly. When it was David's turn to speak, he stood and smoothed his jacket. He thanked Charlotte's parents profusely. He talked about his career, his ambitions, his gratitude for being accepted into such a distinguished family. Then he said, "I want to thank my mother for coming today." The room turned to look at me. All those eyes, all at once. I felt my face flush hot. "My mother taught me the value of hard work," David continued, "and I thought maybe, just maybe, he was going to acknowledge everything I'd done. She showed me that you can't get by on dreams alone. You need discipline, ambition. You need to want something better than what you were born into. Something better than what you were born into." The words hit me like a physical blow. because what he was really saying, what everyone in that room heard, was that being born into my world, into my life, was something to escape from, something to be ashamed of. People clapped politely. David sat down, and Charlotte kissed his cheek, and I sat in my corner, holding my champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter, feeling more alone than I'd felt since the day my husband died. The dancing started. David and Charlotte's first dance was to a song I didn't recognize, something modern and romantic. They looked perfect together, spinning across the floor while everyone watched and smiled. Then came the traditional dances. Charlotte danced with her father, both of them laughing, him twirling her around like she was still his little girl. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. I waited for David to come find me, to ask me to dance the way a son should dance with his mother at his wedding. I smoothed my dress, tried to fix my hair, prepared my smile. But David walked right past table 12. He asked Charlotte's grandmother to dance instead. A woman who sat at the head table in her designer gown and pearl necklace, a woman who'd probably never worked a day in her life. I watched them dance, my son and this stranger, and I felt something crack open inside me. All those years, all those sacrifices, all those nights I'd held him when he was sick, helped him with homework, cheered at his school plays and soccer games. All those times I'd believed we had a bond that nothing could break. Patricia touched my arm gently. "Mrs. Harrison, would you like some air? You look pale." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I stood on shaky legs and made my way toward the exit, desperate to escape before anyone saw me cry. But as I passed near the head table, I heard Charlotte's voice, sharp and clear. "Thank God she's leaving." I was worried she'd try to dance with David. Can you imagine? In that dress? Her bridesmaids giggled, and one of them said, "At least she knew enough to sit in the back." I stopped walking. I stood there frozen, while cruel laughter washed over me. And in that moment, something changed inside me. The sadness, the hurt, the shame, it all hardened into something else, something stronger, because I realized I had a choice. I could leave quietly, let them think I was exactly what they believed, simple, humble, forgettable. Or I could stay, and I could speak the truth that I'd been carrying for 3 long months, ever since I'd received that wedding invitation and made a decision that would change everything. I turned around slowly, my old legs steadier than they'd been all evening. The laughter at the head table faded as people noticed me standing there in the middle of the dance floor, my simple floral dress a stark contrast to the sea of silk and satin surrounding me. "Mrs. Harrison?" Patricia had followed me, worry etched on her kind face. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, dear," I said, and this time I meant it. "Actually, I'm better than I've been in months." David had noticed the commotion. He was making his way toward me, his expression panicked. "Mom? Is everything okay? Do you need to sit down?" "No, sweetheart," I said, and I heard my voice carry across the quiet room. "I've been sitting all evening. I think it's time I stood up." Charlotte appeared at David's elbow, her perfect smile tight at the edges. "Is there a problem? Should we call a doctor?" "No doctor needed," I replied, "but I think it's time everyone here learned something about me, about who I really am." I saw confusion flicker across David's face, followed by something that might have been fear. "Mom, what are you—" "Hush now," I said gently, the way I used to when he was small and interrupting. "Let Mama speak." A microphone sat on the stage where the string quartet had been playing. I walked toward it, my worn heels clicking against the parquet floor. Each step felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of space I'd been denied all evening. "Excuse me," I said to the young man, adjusting the sound equipment. "May I borrow this for just a moment?" He looked uncertain, glancing toward David and Charlotte, but something in my expression made him step aside. I took the microphone, and the weight of it in my hand felt like power. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice amplified across the ballroom. "For those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting me, I'm Dorothy Harrison, David's mother, the woman in the floral dress at table 12. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I saw Rebecca stand up from her table, her face alarmed. Jennifer was watching with wide eyes, her wine glass forgotten. "I want to thank Charlotte's family for this beautiful wedding," I continued. "The flowers are stunning. The food is exquisite. Everything is absolutely perfect." I paused. "Though I notice my son didn't ask me to dance." That was a bit disappointing. "David, you used to stand on my feet when you were 4 years old, and we'd dance around the kitchen to the radio. Do you remember that?" David's face had gone pale. "Mom, maybe we should—" "Do you remember our kitchen, David?" I spoke over him gently but firmly. It was small. The linoleum was cracked. The refrigerator made a funny humming sound. But it was warm. It was full of love. It was home. I could see people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Charlotte's father was whispering urgently to someone near him. "I heard someone earlier today call me simple," I said. "And you know what? They're right. I am simple. I've lived a simple life. I cleaned houses for 40 years. I know more about removing stains than I do about stock portfolios. I can make a week's worth of meals from $20, but I can't tell you the first thing about wine vintages or summer homes in the Hamptons." "Mrs. Harrison," Charlotte's mother had stood up, her voice sharp. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate time." "When is the appropriate time?" I asked, looking directly at her. "When would it be appropriate for me to tell everyone that I heard you call me simple earlier? That you discussed my son's humble background like it was a disease you needed to quarantine?" Gasps echoed through the room. Charlotte's mother's face turned red, and she sat down abruptly. I turned back to the crowd. "I want to tell you all a story. 3 months ago, when David called to tell me about this wedding, he mentioned something that broke my heart. He said Charlotte's family is very wealthy, very connected. He said I should try to, and I quote, fit in." David was shaking his head, his eyes pleading with me to stop, but I couldn't stop now. The truth was pushing its way out of me like water through a cracked dam. "That same week, I received a phone call from a lawyer," I continued. "A very polite lawyer who explained that Charlotte's family wanted to ensure that David's relatives wouldn't be a financial burden on the couple. He asked me to sign a document promising I would never ask David or Charlotte for money, would never claim any sort of inheritance, would never—" "That's not true," Charlotte interrupted, stepping forward. "That's not— Mom, tell her that's not what—" But Charlotte's mother's face told the truth before her mouth could form lies. "I didn't sign that document," I said quietly. "Instead, I made a phone call of my own. To a lawyer I used to clean house for back in the day, a good man who owed me a favor." I smiled, remembering. "You see, I used to clean his office every Thursday evening. One night I found him there crying. His wife had left him, taken his children. He was so lost, so broken. I sat with him, made him tea, listened to him talk for 3 hours while I should have been cleaning. The room was absolutely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. Mr. Peterson became very successful after that hard time. He never forgot my kindness, so when I called him 3 months ago and asked him to look into something for me, he didn't ask questions, he just helped." I took a breath. I asked him to find out about Charlotte's family business. The hotels, the real estate empire, all of it. Charlotte's father was on his feet now, his face thunderous. "This is outrageous!" "Security." "Oh, sit down, Walter," I said tiredly. "You'll want to hear this part." The use of his first name shocked him into silence. "Mr. Peterson discovered something interesting," I continued. "The Pemberton hotels are in trouble. Serious financial trouble. Bad investments, unpaid taxes, debt piling up. You're about to lose everything, Walter, unless you can get a significant cash infusion very soon." The color drained from Walter Pemberton's face. Around the room, people began whispering urgently. "My son," I said, looking directly at David, "is being married for his money, for his connections at the bank, for his ability to secure loans and convince investors. This isn't a love match, David. It's a business transaction designed to save the Pemberton Empire." The ballroom exploded with noise. People were standing, talking over each other, pointing. Charlotte was saying something to David, her face a mask of fury and panic. Her father was shouting. Security guards were indeed approaching, but they seemed unsure of what to do. I held up my hand, and surprisingly, the room began to quiet again. Maybe it was the authority in the gesture, or maybe everyone was too shocked to do anything but watch this unfold. "Before you have me removed," I said calmly, "there's more you should know. David, sweetheart, do you remember that phone call you got 2 weeks ago? The one about the unexpected windfall from an anonymous investor?" David's eyes widened. "How did you—" "That was me, son." I smiled at his confused expression. "Well, not me directly. But I made it happen." "That's impossible," Rebecca said from her table, her lawyer's voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mom, you don't have that kind of money. You live on a pension. You drive a car that's falling apart. How could you possibly—" "You're right," I agreed. "I don't have much money. But what I do have is a house." Jennifer stood up abruptly. "You sold Daddy's house?" "Mom, you can't sell that house. That's our inheritance." The ugly truth of that statement hung in the air. Not concern for where I would live. Not worry about my well-being. Just anger about losing an inheritance. "I didn't sell the house," I said quietly, "but I did finally have it appraised. Your father and I bought that house for $23,000 in 1962. It was in a neighborhood people were leaving, moving to the new suburbs. We got it cheap because it needed work. Your father spent years fixing it up, room by room, making it beautiful, making it a home for our family." I could see my children's faces now, David confused, Rebecca calculating, Jennifer angry. "That neighborhood came back," I continued. "It became fashionable again. Historic, they call it now. Property values went up, way up. Last month, when I had the house appraised, do you know what it was worth?" Silence. $3.7 million. The number landed like a bomb. Rebecca actually stumbled backward into her chair. Jennifer's mouth fell open. David just stared at me like he'd never seen me before. "I took out a loan against the house," I explained. $600,000. I gave half of it to David through that anonymous investor, hoping he'd use it wisely, maybe to secure his future properly. The other half I kept, just in case my children ever needed me, really needed me, not just my money. Charlotte's father was the color of old chalk. "This is insane." "Charlotte, we're leaving. This wedding is—" "Over?" I suggested. "Yes, I think you're right about that." Charlotte was crying now, mascara running down her perfect cheeks. "David, please. This isn't about money. I love you. I really do love you." But David was looking at me, And I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. He was seeing me, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time in a very long time. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "why didn't you tell me about the house, the money, any of it?" "Because I wanted to see who you'd become," I said softly. "I wanted to know if my son would be ashamed of his mother at his wedding. If he'd hide me in a corner because I wasn't fancy enough, rich enough, good enough for his new life." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. I wanted to know if the boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them the most beautiful flowers in the world would grow into a man who forgot where he came from, who forgot that love isn't about silk dresses and crystal champagne glasses. It's about showing up. It's about standing beside the people who stood beside you when you had nothing. "Mrs. Harrison, I think you should sit down." Patricia had appeared at my elbow again, her face kind but worried. "In a moment," I promised. I looked around the room, at all these people in their expensive clothes with their expensive lives. "I want to tell all of you something I learned, scrubbing toilets and washing floors for 40 years. Real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's not in your houses or your cars or your designer dresses. Real wealth is in the people who love you when you have nothing else. The people who show up, the people who stay." I set the microphone down carefully and stepped off the stage. My legs were shaking again, adrenaline draining away, leaving me feeling 100 years old. David was there suddenly, catching me before I could fall. "Mom, I'm so sorry." "I'm so sorry." "I know you are, sweetheart," I said, leaning on him. "But sorry isn't enough anymore. You have a choice to make. What kind of man are you going to be?" Charlotte appeared on his other side. "David, please. We can work this out. My family's financial situation is temporary. We just need—" "You need my money," David said flatly. "You need me to save your family business." "It's not like that." But her eyes told the truth. Rebecca and Jennifer had made their way through the crowd. Rebecca's face was full of shame. Jennifer looked torn between anger and regret. "Mom," Rebecca said, "I should have helped you more. I should have seen what was happening. I'm so sorry." "Me too," Jennifer added, though she was eyeing me with new calculation. "Mom, about that house." "Don't," Rebecca snapped at her sister. "Just don't." I looked at my 3 children, these people I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. They'd all disappointed me in different ways. They'd all failed to see me as anything more than a simple old woman, someone to be managed or avoided or, at best, pitied. But they were still my children. "David," I said gently, "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. If you marry this woman today, you'll be making a choice, not just about your future, but about who you are. Choose carefully." I stepped back from him, released his arm. He stood there in his expensive tuxedo, looking between me and Charlotte, looking like the little boy who used to ask me to fix everything, make everything better. But some things a mother can't fix. Some choices her children have to make alone. The ballroom remained frozen in that terrible tableau, David in the middle, Charlotte clutching his arm, her parents watching with barely concealed fury, my other 2 children standing nearby with expressions of shock and shame, and me, tired and trembling, but finally, standing in the truth. David looked at Charlotte, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing past the beauty and the charm to the calculation underneath. "Did you know," he asked her quietly, "about your family's finances? About why they wanted you to marry me?" Charlotte's perfectly made-up face crumpled. David, I do love you. That part is real. But yes, Daddy explained that you could help us, that you had connections, that you were smart with money. He said it would be good for both families. Both families, David repeated, and I heard the bitterness in his voice. Except my family was supposed to stay hidden away at table 12. He turned to Charlotte's father. Mr. Pemberton, I think you should know something. That anonymous investment my mother mentioned, I didn't use it to play the stock market or make risky investments. I used it to hire a forensic accountant to look into Pemberton hotels. Walter Pemberton's face went from white to purple. You had no right. I had every right. David cut him off. I'm about to marry your daughter. I was about to tie my life, my career, my reputation to your family. I needed to know what I was getting into. He pulled a folded document from his inner jacket pocket. This is a report from one of the best financial investigators in the country. Your company isn't just in trouble, sir, it's drowning. You've been cooking the books for 3 years, hiding losses, moving money between shell companies. The FBI is already investigating. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Charlotte's mother grabbed her husband's arm, her face stricken. Charlotte herself had gone completely white. You knew? She whispered. All this time you knew? I found out 2 weeks ago, David said. He looked at me with something like wonder in his eyes. Right after that mysterious investment appeared. I thought it was suspicious, so I started investigating everything. And that's when I found out the truth about your family, about why you were really marrying me. He took off his wedding ring, the one that had just been placed on his finger during the ceremony less than an hour ago, and held it out to Charlotte. I'm sorry, he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. But I can't do this. I won't build a life on lies. I was raised better than that. Charlotte didn't take the ring. She just stared at him, tears streaming down her face, her perfect wedding day crumbling around her. Security, Walter Pemberton said, his voice shaking with rage. Escort these people out, all of the Harrisons, now. Actually, came a new voice from the entrance to the ballroom. I think you'll find that won't be necessary. Everyone turned to see a distinguished man in his 60s walking toward us. I recognized him immediately, and my heart lifted. Mr. Peterson, I called out. You didn't have to come all this way. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Maggie, he said with a warm smile. He turned to address the room. I'm James Peterson, attorney at law. I represent Mrs. Harrison, and I'd like to inform Mr. Pemberton that as of this morning, the FBI has formally charged him with securities fraud, tax evasion, and wire fraud. There are federal agents waiting outside to take you into custody. The room erupted in chaos. Charlotte's mother screamed. Her father tried to run, but found his path blocked by 2 men in dark suits who had appeared as if from nowhere. Charlotte collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Mr. Peterson walked over to me and patted my shoulder. You did good, Maggie. Your son deserves to know the truth. They all do. Thank you, James, I said quietly, for everything. David was standing in the middle of the destruction, looking lost. Rebecca had her hand over her mouth, shocked. Jennifer had actually sat down, all the fight gone out of her. I walked over to my son and took his hands in mine. They were shaking. Mom, he said, his voice breaking, I was so wrong. About everything. About you. About what matters. I thought I needed to leave our old life behind to be successful. I thought being ashamed of where I came from was the same as ambition. I'm so sorry. I know you are, baby, I said, using the old endearment from when he was small, and I forgive you. But David, forgiving you doesn't mean what happened here didn't hurt. It doesn't mean we can just go back to how things were. I don't want to go back, he said fiercely. I want to do better. I want to be better. The man you raised me to be." Rebecca and Jennifer had joined us now. Rebecca was crying openly, her perfect makeup ruined. Jennifer looked smaller somehow, her usual bravado stripped away. "Mom," Rebecca said, "I've been so focused on my career, on looking successful, that I forgot to actually be there for you. I sent money instead of time." "I'm sorry." Jennifer said nothing for a long moment. Then, "I called you asking for money, but I never asked how you were doing." "What kind of daughter does that make me?" "It makes you human," I said simply. "We all make mistakes. We all disappoint the people we love sometimes. What matters is whether we learn from it." Around us, the ballroom was emptying. Guests were leaving quickly, eager to escape the scandal, already pulling out their phones to share the gossip. The Pemberton family drama would be all over social media by morning. Charlotte was being led away by her bridesmaids, still crying. The wedding, the marriage, was over before it had really begun. Patricia approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Harrison, can I get you anything? Water? A place to sit?" "No, dear, but thank you," I said. "Thank you for your kindness today. It meant more than you know." She smiled, squeezed my hand, and slipped away. I stood there with my 3 children, in that beautiful ballroom that had been filled with so much cruelty, so much judgment, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt powerful. Not because of the money, the house, the loan, any of it, but because I had stood up. I had spoken truth. I had refused to be invisible. "So," David said after a long moment, "I'm not married. I'm probably going to be famous for all the wrong reasons by tomorrow, and I have no idea what to do next." "How about," I suggested, "we go get some real food? Not fancy French cuisine, just real food. There's a diner about 20 minutes from here that makes the best pie in the state." Rebecca laughed through her tears. "That sounds perfect, Mom." "Can I drive?" Jennifer asked. "I promise I won't ask you about the house value the whole way." "Much appreciated," I said dryly. As we walked out of that ballroom together, me in my simple floral dress, my children in their expensive wedding clothes, all of us a little broken but maybe starting to heal, I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the whispers, the laughter, the cruelty. I thought about my son's face when I revealed the truth. I thought about Charlotte's tears and her father's rage and the spectacular destruction of what was supposed to be a perfect day. And I thought about how sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is let them fall. Let them make mistakes. Let them see the consequences of their choices. Because that's how they learn. That's how they grow. The diner was called Rosie's, and it hadn't changed in the 30 years since I'd first discovered it. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a counter with spinning stools, and the smell of coffee and bacon grease that wrapped around you like a hug the moment you walked in. The waitress, a woman about my age named Sally, took one look at our group, me in my floral dress, David in his tuxedo with his tie loosened, Rebecca in her silver gown, Jennifer in her red cocktail dress, and didn't ask a single question. "Rough day," was all she said. "You could say that," I replied. "Coffee all around? Please." We squeezed into a large corner booth, and for a few minutes, nobody said anything. We just sat there, drinking coffee from thick ceramic mugs, letting the ordinariness of the moment wash over us. Finally, David spoke. "I keep thinking about what you said, Mom, about choosing what kind of man I want to be." "And?" I asked gently. "I've been the wrong kind of man," he said. "I've been the kind who measures success in promotions and stock options. Who thinks an expensive suit makes him better than the people who raised him? Who was embarrassed by his own mother at his wedding?" His voice cracked on that last part, and Rebecca reached over to squeeze his hand. I did the same thing, she admitted. I was so proud of becoming a lawyer, of marrying a surgeon, of having the right address and the right friends. I stopped visiting because your apartment felt small and your neighborhood felt wrong, and I'm ashamed of that. Deeply ashamed. Jennifer picked at her napkin, tearing it into small pieces. I'm the worst of all of us, she said quietly. At least you two were successful. At least you had something to show for abandoning Mom. I just drifted. Bad jobs, bad boyfriends, bad decisions. And I blamed you, Mom. I blamed you for not giving me more, for not setting me up better. But you gave me everything you had. It was me who wasted it. I looked at my 3 children, all of them hurting, all of them starting to understand the ways they'd failed, not just me, but themselves. You want to know something? I said. I'm not surprised by any of this. I've watched it coming for years. I saw David stop calling unless he needed something. I saw Rebecca cancel visits because she was too busy. I saw Jennifer's resentment growing every time I couldn't help her financially, and it broke my heart every single time. They were all crying now, even David, who'd always been the strong one. But here's what I learned today, I continued. Sometimes you have to break to heal. Sometimes you have to hit bottom before you can start climbing back up. You 3 needed to see what you'd become, what we'd all become, and the only way to do that was to let it all fall apart. The house, Rebecca said suddenly. Mom, you can't give away your home. Where will you live? I smiled. I'm not giving it away. Mr. Peterson has been helping me set up a trust. The house will stay in the family, but I'll have access to the funds I need to live comfortably. When I'm gone, it will be divided equally among you 3. But there's a condition. What condition? Jennifer asked warily. That you actually show up, I said simply. Not for the money, not for the inheritance, but for each other. For family dinners and holiday celebrations and phone calls that aren't about asking for favors, for being present in each other's lives. David nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair. Sally came back with menus. You folks ready to order? I ordered the pie I'd promised, apple, with vanilla ice cream. My children ordered food they probably wouldn't eat, still too shaken to be hungry. But we stayed there for hours, talking. Really talking, maybe for the first time in years. David told us about the pressure at work, the constant need to prove himself, to be better than his humble origins. How Charlotte's attention had felt like validation that he'd finally made it, finally become someone worth noticing. The Rebecca talked about the loneliness of her perfect life, the way she and her surgeon husband barely spoke anymore, how she'd built a career but lost herself in the process. Jennifer admitted she'd been in therapy, working on her addiction issues, trying to understand why she'd always felt like the forgotten middle child, the one who couldn't quite measure up. And I listened. I held their hands across the table. I wiped their tears with napkins from the dispenser. I did what mothers do. I made space for their pain and their regret and their hope for something better. Mom, David said as we were finally getting ready to leave, the diner preparing to close for the night. What you did today, exposing Charlotte's family, revealing the truth about everything, that took courage, real courage. I'm not sure I would have had the strength to do that. Of course you would have, I said. You're my son. And despite everything that's happened, despite all the ways you've disappointed me lately, you're still the boy who brought me dandelions. You're still the child who cried when you saw an injured bird. You're still good, David. You just forgot it for a while. We left Rosie's diner that night, not as the family we'd been, fractured and broken and drifting apart, but as something new, something that might, with time and effort and genuine care, become whole again. The next few weeks were difficult. The scandal of the Pemberton wedding made the news. David's name was mentioned, though thankfully he came out of it looking more like a victim than a villain. Charlotte called several times, but David didn't answer. He was done with that chapter of his life. Rebecca started visiting every Sunday. She'd show up at my apartment with bagels and coffee, and we'd sit at my small kitchen table and talk. Really talk about her marriage and her fears and her dreams. She was thinking about leaving the law firm, maybe doing more pro bono work, the kind of law that actually helped people instead of just helping corporations get richer. Jennifer entered rehab. It was hard, and there were setbacks, but she was trying. She called me every day from the facility, and for the first time in years, she sounded hopeful. David moved out of his expensive downtown apartment and into a modest place closer to my neighborhood. He started volunteering at a community center on weekends, teaching financial literacy to teenagers. He said it reminded him of who he used to be before ambition turned into something darker. As for me, I stayed in my house, the one my husband and I had built our life in, the one that was apparently worth millions but would always just be home to me. Mr. Peterson had set up the trust exactly as I'd asked, and for the first time in years, I wasn't worried about money. I could afford to fix things when they broke. I could buy new clothes if I wanted to. I could even take a trip, though I'd never been much for traveling. But the best thing, the thing that made everything worth it, was the night David showed up at my door unannounced, holding a bouquet of dandelions he'd picked from the park. "Remember?" he said, smiling through tears. "The most beautiful flowers in the world. I took those dandelions and put them in a vase on my kitchen table, and they stayed there until every single one had wilted and died, because they were more precious to me than all the roses at that fancy wedding combined. You know, when you get to be my age, you start to understand things you couldn't possibly grasp when you were younger. You understand that life isn't about the big moments, the weddings and the graduations and the promotions. It's about the small moments. The Sunday morning phone calls, the dandelions picked from the park, the willingness to show up even when it's hard. I look back on that wedding day, on standing in that ballroom in my simple floral dress, while people laughed and whispered, and I don't feel angry anymore. I don't even feel hurt. What I feel is grateful that I had the courage to speak the truth. Grateful that my children, despite all their mistakes, were willing to listen and change. Grateful that we got a second chance when so many families never do. My friend Martha once told me, "Maggie, you're too forgiving. Your kids don't deserve you." And maybe she was right. Maybe they didn't deserve my forgiveness. But love isn't about what people deserve. It's about what you choose to give them anyway. I raised my children to be strong, to be ambitious, to want more than I could give them. And they did want more. They wanted so much more that they forgot to be grateful for what they had. They forgot where they came from. They forgot me. But here's what I've learned. People can find their way back. Children can remember. Hearts can heal. It takes work and time and genuine effort, but it's possible. And it's worth it. These days, my children visit often, not because they have to, not out of obligation, but because they want to. We have dinner together most Sundays. Rebecca brings the food, David sets the table, Jennifer does the dishes, and we talk, we laugh, we remember. Sometimes I tell them stories from when they were young, and they listen like they're hearing these stories for the first time. Maybe in a way they are. Maybe they weren't really listening before. David never remarried. He dates occasionally, but he's more careful now, more thoughtful about what he wants in a partner. He told me he's looking for someone who loves him for who he is, not what he can provide. Someone who wouldn't be embarrassed to sit at table 12. Rebecca left her law firm and started her own practice focused on helping elderly people with estate planning and protecting them from financial abuse. She says I inspired her, which makes me prouder than any fancy degree or prestigious job title ever could. Jennifer is 6 months sober now. She got a job at a bakery, and she loves.